CNN's Elena Trien is in Pittsburgh, where President Trump is also set to speak here in a few minutes. Elena, what more are you learning about how the White House is handling the fallout here?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's very clear from our reporting, our conversations with White House officials, Trump administration officials, that he wants specifically this story, or people to move on from this story. He's trying to get his base to let this go away, and he's directing some of his team behind closed doors to do what they can to help it die down. That's why we actually saw the president directly making calls this weekend. We know he reached out to Charlie Kirk, a fierce supporter of his, the head of the Turning Point USA, and they held a summit this weekend. He had tried to, convince him to, knock off with the criticism, tamp down some of the criticism of the handling of this Epstein case. And we actually saw Kirk yesterday say that for now, he is not going to comment further on all of this. And we also know that the vice president, J.D. Vance, he was trying to play peacemaker with people within the administration where there's been infighting on this between the FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino. He also called Kash Patel, the director of the FBI, and Attorney General Pam Bondi were reporting. But just to add to some of what we heard from the president right there, he's been very full-throated in his defense of Bondi repeatedly now in the last several days. But he also argued that, he believes that if she believes that they can put out some more of these files and have them do it in a credible way, that she should. But then he also tried to argue and really cast the blame on some of his political opponents, saying they made up some of this idea that there was a file list or a client list in the first place. Take a listen.
On Epstein, of the review of the files, Attorney General Pam Bondi.
A very quick briefing.
Did she tell you, what did she tell you about the review? And specifically, did she tell you at all that your name appeared in the file?
No, she's given us just a very quick briefing, and in terms of the credibility of the different things that they've seen. And I would say that, these files were made up by Comey. They were made up by Obama. They were made up by the Biden. We went through years of that with the Russia hoax, with all of the different things that we had to go through. We've gone through years of it. But she's handled it very well, and it's going to be up to her. Whatever she thinks is credible, she should release.
So a few things to note there, and of course I want to really point out that when he references former Presidents Obama and Biden or former FBI Director James Comey saying that they made up the Epstein files, I'd remind you that a lot of people in the president's base and even some people in the administration had been the ones who had really been pushing this idea that these Epstein files needed to be released, that there was more to them, that there was potential accomplices listed in them. So I just want to give you that quick fact check. But look, all to say, I think the big point on this is a story now that has been out for over a week, and the backlash we have seen from his base, from the MAGA wing of his party, has not really quieted down despite the president's efforts to get them to move on from this. And so that's why he's continuing to really have to come out here and defend the Attorney General, but it doesn't look like he's changing his tune on that just yet, Brianna.
Yeah, it does not. Elena Trien, thank you for that report. Let's go now to CNN Chief Data Analyst Harry Enten. And Harry Enten, there's a new CNN poll that's just out. How's the controversy impacting the president's support?
Yeah, I would say that the word is dissatisfied. That is how Americans feel in terms of the releases so far of the Epstein case. Take a look here. Epstein case, amount of info released. The winner here, 50% dissatisfied. Doesn't matter, 29%, not heard enough, 17%. But look at the bottom of your screen. The percentage that are satisfied is just 3%. That's 1, that's 2, that is just 3%. I feel like the count on Sesame Street. Just 3% of Americans are satisfied so far with the amount of information released. The clear winner in this particular case is 50%. Half of the public is dissatisfied, at least so far.
And are you seeing a big difference between how Republicans and Democrats are viewing this?
No, and that I think is kind of the interesting sort of nugget in what's going on here. You see this 50% dissatisfied, and let's break it down by party. Okay, Epstein case, amount of info released. Look at this. You get 43% of lean GOP, that's Republicans and independents who lean towards the Republican Party, who are dissatisfied. Look at this. Just 4% satisfied? My goodness gracious. When you only have 4% that is with Donald Trump on a particular issue, that is ridiculously low. I've never seen anything quite like it. How about lean Democrat? 60% dissatisfied. Compare that to 3% who are satisfied. Again, 4%, 3%, Republican, Democrat, you rarely ever see this type of agreement. Now, of course, there's another divide in American politics, one that has increased over the past few decades, and that is whites with a college degree, whites without a college degree. But in this particular case, we see agreement. What are we talking about? This Epstein case, amount of info released, dissatisfied? 55% of white college graduates and 53% of white non-college graduates, Donald Trump's historic base, yet the majority are dissatisfied.
Really interesting numbers. Harry Enten, thank you so much. Boris?
Let's dig deeper on this with former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe. Andy, thanks so much for being with us. I want to start with what you make of this rift between the current Deputy Director and the DOJ, and then by extension, the White House.
Sure, Boris. So the tension between the deputy director and the AG is really untenable. This is a bad thing for the FBI, bad thing for the Department of Justice, and really not the kind of thing that, in my experience, having worked for many attorneys general, never seen anything like this before, and I can't imagine any other attorney general ever tolerating an act of disrespect along the lines of what allegedly took place between Pam Bondi and Dan Bongino in the White House when they got into some trading accusations and some sort of shouting match in front of the president's chief of staff. I can't imagine that happening. DOJ and FBI frequently knock heads on issues and have different opinions about the way to handle investigations, but those conversations always take place in the house, within the family. You never let those things spill over into the public.
MAGA has never been this, there's never been this divide. Even J6, yes, some people quit on Trump over J6. Remember, there were a lot of like lower to mid-level staffers that gave up on Trump that day. A lot of them, you know, younger women, for example, who spoke out and were brave about it. But by and large, the MAGA base very quickly came back to Trump and elected top Republicans, a little bit slower, but very quickly came back to Trump. This doesn't seem like it. It seems like this issue, and whether or not this should be the issue, I'm not trying to downplay it, but this is the issue where people are saying, no, I'm done. I give up on this. Like, I can't deal with Donald on this issue because he's letting us down. His whole brand, guys, was built on, like, prejudice, hatred, and conspiracy. And the conspiracy part was specifically, there are rich people behind the scenes doing awful things, and I'm going to expose them. Well, it turns out that maybe the rich, awful people were Trump and his buddies.
Epstein is a key that picks the lock on so many things.
It went on and on and on like that. And if you live in that universe of politics or you follow that kind of media, what you saw there is not new. That's a crescendo over the past week and the past years, because the conspiracies and the content that power so many MAGA voices for their audiences, for their online profits, and for their political heat make this particular topic an obvious public betrayal, one that they cannot abide, not in front of their audiences. People have been promised a payoff for many years on this one. So now President Trump and his top aides are engulfed by the very kind of conspiracy theory that they spent so many years promoting, apparently without a lot of forethought about how it would land if they were in charge again. And we're seeing calls for a so-called accountability for their own leaders who claimed one thing and then did the opposite. If you want to fact-check Pam Bondi's claim that she had the Epstein client list on her desk, which is one of those very literal statements, it's not like someday we'll get accountability or we'll learn more. It's, I have this well-described client list from this now deceased sex trafficker on my desk, she said. And that wasn't true. And the fact check in this case for that is in the memo her office released on behalf of the entire Justice Department. So you can see how, whether or not you see this as partly a runaway conspiracy theory or content farming debacle, it also involves whether government officials are telling the truth. And on this one, there appears to be an overlap between the tests that journalists and independent accountability professionals and inspectors general tend to apply and what the MAGA faithful want. What you heard there, answer the question, are you telling the truth? And should there be accountability for that? Now, the conference you saw those clips from is from a normally pro-Trump group, Turning Points USA. And you saw the big names, Ingram, Kelly, Tucker Carlson, a lot of Fox veterans, Steve Bannon, who still has a very active relationship inside this administration, warning them that they must change course, that this cannot just be quieted down or covered up, to use the sinister version of how so much of this story on Epstein has played out over the years. Now, Trump's DOJ famously basically said, nope, nothing more to see here. No more information or evidence to be given, and the questions they had very loudly pushed were now not going to be answered with the memo I mentioned. Well, I want to play another podcast that's quite popular, not just on the right, I think with young people, business people, but also in MAGA, and that's Lex Friedman. This was also height of the campaign general election, how Trump was hitting this.
It's just very strange for a lot of people that the list of clients that went to the island has not been made public.
Yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it? Probably will be. Yeah, I'd certainly take a look at it. I'd be inclined to do the Epstein. I'd have no problem with it.
Emily, just remind everyone how this works legally. Typically in complex, large criminal investigations, while material does come to light sometimes at trial, there is not a randomized release of unverified material.
Right, because you want to usually be careful about who you're implicating in criminal activity. And also, if you're building a case against actual criminals, then you want to make sure that you're not opening it up to public scrutiny too early in a way that could, for example, pollute the jury pool. And so prosecutors normally marshal their evidence. They, if they're following the rules, turn it over to the defense before trial, and then it gets fully aired at the trial. So this idea that you're just going to release all of this, if it does have serious implications for other people's guilt or innocence, is pretty, let's use the word, unusual.
Yeah, and legally, do you believe the DOJ memo now? I mean, it kind of just restates what the prior findings were. It doesn't prove or show some great query. They could have done a bigger probe. What do you think of it?
I mean, it just seemed like they were not making a compelling case that they had gone through this big investigation, trying to kind of get rid of this, right?
There's almost never been this confluence of Trump staffers, Trump employees giving up on him and walking out the door, combined with the base. There's been moments where the Trump elite and the Trump base have been disaligned, right? Misaligned. For example, a good one is how there was a lot of regular MAGAs that were not happy when Trump said he was going to support work visas for high-skilled workers. And remember, back around Christmas time, New Year's, before he came into power, there was this whole debate where Elon and Trump and the rich and wealthy and well-connected MAGAs, they were like, we need more immigrants to come here because they will bring their skills and help make us richer, right? And a lot of regular MAGAs were like, no, you promised to shut the borders and blah, 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 blah. And look, we're not here to debate that issue in particular, but there was a divide. But right now, top MAGAs, some of the very top people, and the MAGA rank and file are united against Donald Trump. And ironic as it is, united with a lot of Democrats in the general idea that Trump is hiding something, and you can't work for a man that's hiding stuff from you. And guys, it gets even worse here. The data is clear.